get started. So thank you all for being here. Happy New Year. Welcome back. So today we have a little bit more of, I think it will be a little bit more of an informal just opportunity to share and discuss some successful strategies for keeping students engaged. So we have Terry Tocantins from communication who's going to share with us. And you teach at theater, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I teach a theater arts workshop, which is basically let's put on a show type class, and our version of a theater history class.
Okay, cool. So he'll be sharing, and then also Dr. Glynita Bell from the Department of Social Work is going to be sharing with us as well. So we can just kind of split the time, and I'll let it be up to you all how you want to handle questions. I'll monitor the chat, but I'll just kind of let you decide if you want to just let us know when you start, like if you want to hold questions till the end or just kind of, take questions as you go, whatever you're more comfortable with is fine. But I think we should have plenty of time for questions and open sharing and stuff at the end. We're just sharing with a couple of different people. So let's see. I mean, it doesn't really, I don't know if it matters who goes first. Terry, do you want to start us out?
Sure, unless Glynita, would you like to begin?
I'm open to either, Terry, whichever you prefer.
Why don't I start roll the ball down the hill, okay? And then then you can carry us home.
Sounds good.
I'll start with a question for you, Glynita. Did you do a lot of online classes when you were getting your degrees?
So I completed my doctorate in an online program at the University of Arizona through their global campus and had a phenomenal experience. And prior to that, I taught at an online university, Ashford University. I taught there for 4 years and really enjoyed that experience as well.
Oh, great. Okay. That's awesome. I had a similar experience. I dropped out of college in the 90s because it was the 90s, and I work in the theater. So it's a bit like being a college athlete and running off to Italy to play basketball in your senior year, right? Because you just love the game more than you love getting your degree. So I had like a year left of my BFA until 2014, when I was sort of compelled to even go back to college because I was taking care of an aged parent. I think this is something we probably all identify with. And my mom was like, hey, you should go back to Los Angeles. And I couldn't leave my mom. So I made up a big thing about going back to school. And then, you don't lie to your mom. So I really went back and ran into an office and made them take me into their program. It was called Charter Oak State University. It's in Connecticut. And I had the experience of taking 10 online classes in about the same amount of months. And it changed education for me. It was a Damascus moment. It all flipped. I'd never been good at this sort of thing. Maybe like a 2.3 GPA on average. And the systematic nature of online classes and the people in the classes and the sense of non-competition, to make a better verb out of it, maybe camaraderie. I took to it like a duck to water for some reason. I know like a lot of us probably have frustrations with it, and I have frustrations teaching it. But I've only had frustrations teaching it, if I'm being really honest, since the pandemic began. Other than that, it's in general a system I really, really enjoy, especially for something more like a theater history class rather than a practicum workshop in performance or in verbal communication. I ended up going to University of Louisville for graduate school because Louisville, unlike a lot of cities in the country, has such great volunteer stuff, right? There's so many great nonprofits here that when I was interviewing graduate schools, the U of L folks were able to say, hey, do you want to do Shakespeare in prison? And do you want to be part of the African American theater program? And do you want to teach? So long story short, I got recruited to this city and fell in love with it. And since 2016, I've been teaching in classrooms and online. So that's me. Glynita, tell us about yourself.
Sure. I actually had a full theater scholarship. I know, how ironic is that? From high school into undergrad at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. We performed at the International Thespian Festival twice when I was in high school. And I did not take the scholarship because, as you know, in theater, you cannot double major. And I have wanted to be a therapist since I was in middle school, which is also just a little odd. But I wanted to major in psychology. So I did not take that scholarship, but I went on to Ball State University and studied psychology there. Went to University of Louisville, did my master's degree in social work. I received my LCSW licensure and started a private practice in 2012 and came on faculty at Spalding in 2017. And as I mentioned, I just finished my doctorate, like 2 months ago. So that has been my thanks. But they don't mention that pesky like publishing piece of that puzzle. I thought the finish line was the oral defense, and I was so excited, had like a small party, and then that following Monday I got this email with all the next steps. So there's that. That's my background. I will say that teaching online at Ashford was kind of the eye-opening moment for me.
Glynita, we lost you. You're on mute.
Thank you. I did that with my fingers somehow. I had not taken really any online courses at U of L. We had online components of our courses, but I have to be honest, I didn't have a strong opinion of online education after attending only brick and mortar institutions. And when I went to teach at Ashford, the structure and the technology that they had in place, it was not like anything I had seen before. And again, my opinion of, I thought, I'll teach at this school. It'll be how I get my foot in the door, and eventually I'll get to go teach at a real school. That sounds really terrible, but that's what I was thinking until I got there and recognized how rigorous the program was, how the uniformity of knowing what each student was going to get in the classroom as far as the course material, etc. It was just a really eye-opening experience, and it changed my opinion drastically about how valuable and the quality that you could receive in online education.
I think there's a difference in how time is structured when you have a brick and mortar course, to like the externalities of like, I gotta wake up, I gotta make my hair look good, I gotta find parking, I gotta be in a room, I have certain feelings about the people I'm sitting next to. All of the stuff that can distract versus knowing exactly when you're gonna post, how long your post is gonna be, how many responses you're gonna do to the other students' posts. that for my ADHD brain, the latter way of taking a class for me made me feel comfortable rather than made me feel anxious. Like sometimes I get, even teaching a class, I get imposter syndrome like crazy. Or even weather itself can affect whether or not our class is gonna be a good class that day. Did you find when you were studying and or teaching that there were pressures that were released, or was the pressure amped up?
I think it's a dual situation. And I think that what we have to do as faculty is to do our best to make sure that we help students to release that pressure. I think some of the things that you mentioned that may feel like deterrents or distractions in a physical classroom setting are often bridge makers in classroom settings. Although they may prompt some anxiety in the moment, those are pieces that we use to increase engagement. When you get into an online setting, especially for our students that have not had the great experiences that you and I have had, Terry, that can be pretty intimidating, and it can cause some students to retreat significantly, and they will do simply what you just said, which is respond to the post, do however many replies they have to, and get on to the next course. And while that does check the boxes, our goal is truly to engage our students in the learning experience. And to do that, I think when in the online setting, there's different tools that we have to employ.
Do you do stuff like group projects?
I do. I think group projects are important, but I think I teach primarily in the graduate program. So whether it's online or in the classroom, I think group projects have to make sense. And what I mean by that is the project needs to be substantial enough that the students find it necessary to work within a group. If it's something they feel like they can whip out and do on their own, you're going to see them divvy it up really quickly, and they're going to just do what they have to do to, again, check the box. So my group projects are, they're heavy lifting intentionally because you want them to rely on the group. And one of the methods that was used at University of Arizona that I won't say I loved at first, but I did begin to embrace it, was the group roles were assigned to us, or we could identify which group role we wanted to take on. And I think just kind of identifying and naming a component that you had to play within this group for the group to be successful was super useful to increase buy-in for group work, especially online. And for me at University of Arizona, I mean, I was in Kentucky, and my peers, my cohort, were across the United States. So we weren't going to meet up at a coffee shop. We were truly doing this completely virtually, and it increased buy-in significantly.
Yeah, I agree. I was assigned one group project to just be 4 people, and then on the second group project, I was told, okay, you're the team coordinator, and this person is going to be taking care of all the citations and works cited. So even if there were minor differences in responsibilities, you could find a way to divvy up the pie in a way that made you feel like you had a part of the heavy lifting, like you said. Yeah. Where else are we going with this? Do you do hybrids?
Yeah, the social work department is very hybrid in nature. Traditionally, we've done 6-week courses that are hybrid, and we'll meet 3 times face-to-face, and the other times our classes are online.
And I'm gonna bet, because you're in the grad.
Excuse me.
Gesundheit. Your students' ages probably are, should we say, 30 and up? Is that arbitrary?
We have such a great bachelor's program. We do have quite a few traditional aged graduate students that come straight in from our BSW program. But we also do have quite a few people that have had a great career. maybe through the Department of Child Services for 15, 20 years, and now they're ready to move on into something different, and they're getting their master's degree. So quite a diverse classroom setting in social work.
If you ask me, I think that's where like the rubber meets the road. If you have a person who's got 15 years as a civil servant, right? They've been through the rite of passage of doing the gig, and then you bring them back to either a grad or an undergrad program, that student is just coming from, they've got different tools, and their heart rate is literally different, right? Their engagement and energy is going to be different than someone who's 18 and who has 9 different rites of passage that they haven't gone through yet, and they're worried about, you know, their bodies, quite literally.
Yeah, and I think for us in social work, that is a constant truth,
Yeah.
because we do have such a diverse classroom setting, and it really is our job as faculty to make sure that everyone feels like what they bring to the table has value and merit, and we want to hear it. So truly, a lot of our people that have been working in the field without a master's degree for many, many years, they bring great practice wisdom, but they are inherently lacking that very refined academic component to that their counterparts who have just finished undergrad, 2 months ago or what have you, are very astute in. And blending those tools together is really what makes the classroom super powerful. So whether we're doing that in person or online, it is so much of the faculty's, I guess, responsibility to push the ball on that engagement and help people understand how they can actively engage and what they are able to bring to the table.
I so agree with you. When I finished my degree as an adult, I was able to get through, but I'm just going to say it and admit it. I walked into graduate school not knowing what MLA or ALA was. Didn't know. Never applied to me. Didn't know how to write a bibliography. All of this stuff that, like, being an art school person, it never made a difference, right? I could tune any of that information out. And getting through online courses, the one thing I think that kind of hobbled them was that they didn't introduce Purdue, right? Like as an online resource. They didn't lean on that and push it, because they can unfortunately burn and churn and get through a 6 to 10 week course without leaning into the compositional elements of becoming a better writer and being able to be more articulate in your expertise, rather than sort of, as we were all both implying before, checking the boxes and moving on. When you have an adult coming back and pursuing graduate work, how do we get them to go to the Purdue site and,
Yeah,
sort of
and for me, I just make it a part of our assignments. I think that in the college setting, most people do the things that they know they have to do to get graded. And while we want to think that people have the best intentions, people are also humans, and they have time restrictions, and they have children, and they have jobs, and they have all kinds of other things. So things that I know that are important as factors in their learning, like visiting our writing center at Spalding. I teach the intro to graduate writing course. It is a part of their first assignment. When they submit that first assignment, they have to submit proof that they went to the writing center by showing me the feedback that they used from that appointment. And I see the question in the chat about using application in an online setting. And I would say the biggest adaptation that I've done of that is I am the like resident clinician in the social work department. So I get to teach all the fun clinical classes. And when we moved to virtual, as excited as I was super nervous because practice and those clinical skills, you really, there's an energy that you feel around one another that you like, oh, you're creating a space that feels comfortable, right? Like there's so much, like theater, right? There's so much
Yeah.
just inherent feeling that happens. And when you're not sharing physical space, you don't get to rely on some of those things. So my favorite thing that I have done online and in person is a clinical skills clinic where I have licensed clinicians come in pre-pandemic, come into the classroom. We made a full day workshop out of it. And my students, rather than doing that same old project where you do a clinical intake on your colleague or peer in the classroom, you have to do it with an actual licensed clinician and then receive that feedback, which is so helpful to them in the future. Well, figuring out how to do that online, it helped that because I am a clinician at the private practice, my entire practice went virtual. And those humps of building rapport with a client, completing documentation, getting people to feel comfortable with you on screen, teaching them how to create a safe space in their own home that mimics what we create in the office setting, all those things had to be done right away. So teaching my students how to do that, because it is a skill, I mean, hybrid or online therapy, that's not going away, right? Like this is going to be something that we have forevermore. So being able to be right there with them and teaching them that skill set as it was happening was such an honor. And it required a lot of work of me because I was doing on my own practice, but also trying to teach them how to do it. And long story short, it came out phenomenally. The clinicians were able to join, of course, via Zoom. They were able to set their appointments. And then as the professor, I was able just to kind of pop in and listen to their sessions, which typically I'm only able to get tiny bits and pieces. You know how that is when you're facilitating something and you're floating around the room and you just kind of get pieces. I was able to get significant chunks of these interviews, which I was then able to process with the students. So that's how we have been able to add some of those pieces. Well, I should say me specifically in the clinical realm.
Did you do like breakout rooms?
We did breakout rooms, and I had students and their volunteers sign up for time slots. So I was able to be in many places at one time.
Yeah, the breakout rooms are, we can't do that in real life, right?
Right.
And
even when you
have,
float, it's not the same.
True. But we also can have 500 people on this call.
Mm-hmm.
Or 4.
Yep.
And I really love that flexibility. So experiential stuff is like a hurdle, but not the biggest hurdle. And you and me, you and I, we share practices that are at the heart experiential. I never thought I could teach an acting class online. That's ridiculous, right? That person has to be intimate. There's a certain energy that comes off a person. There's a give and take, that we've been doing this for thousands of years on Earth. And now we're going to take away the very thing that makes it easy and exciting, which is another person in front of you. I think it is possible to still teach experiential stuff, even though in my field, I haven't seen a good online play, right? I guess we've all seen that, right? Someone does a performance online and we click in and watch it in real time. And it's not really, it's sometimes it's pretty good. But you can still teach in the humanities. Here's a question for the room, Glynita, if you think this is good to share with everybody. when does it become different? When you're in a humanities kind of or arts and science sort of class versus a social science or like just a straight up STEM math. How does online instruction change? Because I've taken exactly 2 science classes online and they were pretty dry. What's your experience been with that, like when you were taking your classes, Glynita?
I think that depending on the faculty member in any department, you can end up with something that feels dry and flat. And I think the goal of engagement is to not have that happen. So when we think of engagement on multiple levels, you've got engagement with the instructor, engagement student to student, engagement with the course material. And when we're focusing on each of those areas, I think it could bring a lot. And, you know, I'm a social worker, so all the science and math, y'all can keep all that. So I think it could even bring to life a math class, right? Because if my professor is, you know, teaching this fully online class and they're popping on and doing a video message before every module each week, and they're bringing life to the material, they're giving me something to look forward to, little nuggets that they place throughout the week that I'm interested in hunting for, etc. Whether we're talking about math or theater or social work, I think there are engagement techniques that allow the pathway for students that choose to be fully engaged in a course to do so.
If I'm doing like a really super awesome advanced course or a graduate course, I try to go into what it might not have. The term decolonization in theater is pretty buzzy, right? It's something that's thankfully happening right now. And I usually wait until you get the introductory stuff, and then I sort of introduce stuff that is like closer to what we do in real theater companies. And I bring in this theorist, practical guy named Augusto Boal, B-O-A-L, who is Brazilian. And he wrote a book in the late 70s called Theater of the Oppressed. And it is a way of teaching specifically theater that 40 years ago, he sort of wrote a great course, online teaching guide, without knowing it. Because he approaches teaching a theater class the opposite of the traditional, hey, remember when we all sort of learned Aristotle in undergraduate? And they gave us a class and we learned about plot and character and theme and spectacle, and we learned how a tragedy works, and there's this big arc, and there's sort of like one hero who's done a bad thing, and we watch their tragic fall because they've had a flaw, all of that stuff. I found really early on in the pandemic that stuff is teachable, but what is much more teachable is community engagement. And Boal was revolutionary because he took out the protagonist from a theater piece and made, if we were doing a Boal piece, everyone in the chat would be saying, okay, it's Glynita's story. And as we're telling Glynita's story, we could yell cut and jump in and give a note, adapt, tweak, and then yell resume. And then Glynita would continue. And so it puts you, Glynita, in a really interesting space because your character is being changed by the community and the environment. So you got to roll with it. You can't say no because, you know, it's theater, right? And for the rest of the people involved, they're compelled to have to put some skin in the game. because everyone's watching everyone all the time here, right? And I found that was an approach to teaching people how to understand space and time and movement and energy and story in a real-time way that felt like we were in a room together, even though we all knew we weren't in a room together.
I have a couple things just to follow up and to get to Patty's question in the
Yeah,
chat too. So
yeah.
I think kind of just listening to what both of you all are sharing. One thing well, two things. So Patty's question is, or she just says, that her struggles, that this is kind of difficult to gain these skills because it's kind of behind the curtain. And so I guess, and Patty, correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but I kind of take that to, like, how do you gauge the student engagement and if it's working or not when, if it's asynchronous, maybe you really don't have that direct feedback, or if it's synchronous, maybe all the cameras are off. So that's kind of one component of it. And then the other thing, like just even with what you were just sharing, Terry, is what are some strategies that you all use to actually facilitate that engagement? I think for me, when we've done the online meetings, and I've always done like synchronous online meetings, there will always be maybe, a handful or less of students who are super engaged and would be playing along with this activity, so to speak, but then the rest are just cameras off, and you wonder what they're thinking, like, this is a waste of my time. Are they even paying attention? So what do you do to facilitate everyone working together in those collaborative activities that you've mentioned? And then how do you gauge that engagement, I guess?
For me, I think that if I'm meeting, I have some classes that are, we don't have any face-to-face meetings in our online setting. Engagement is done by checking in with the students directly. It's still the onus is on me to check in with my students as I'm giving feedback. I think I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but I always think of online classes as more work than my face-to-face classes. I am in the classroom more, so to speak, shorter spurts of time. You all know we teach for hours in the social work department when we're face-to-face, but shorter periods of time. But I'm checking in, I'm reading posts, I'm nudging students, those kind of things daily in my online classes, because you have to be able to engage and to gauge if they are engaged or not. That's the only tool that we have. I am open to phone calls. I don't mind talking on a phone, with a student. I'm not into the texting because students have a hard time figuring out boundaries that, 11:30 at night is not appropriate to text me. But they won't call you that late for whatever reason. So, but I don't mind. I think what I've found is that being present, the student really being able to feel your presence in that classroom, whether you're meeting face-to-face or not, is a huge factor in the student becoming engaged in the class or not. And we have to use what tools we have available. And also think defining what engagement looks like at the start of your class is important too. It's important for you as the professor to know what it is you're actually looking for. And it's important for your students to know how, some students are very driven by, earning points, or they just are driven to please, whatever that is. But some students really just need you to identify, what does that look like here? Because they will have had other classes that engagement meant they turned in all their work. And, they turned in their work and they got an A and they moved on. And that is fine for that experience. But in my classroom, that is not engagement. That is doing your assignment. That's not the same thing. And so helping them to understand that engagement is, like I said, at those 3 levels, engaging with me directly. If you can complete an entire course with me and not have talked to me, you're not engaged with me. further, if you are not engaging with the other peers in your class, you're not engaged, and that's not the point. I look at all of our classes as networking opportunities. How are you building your network for your future? You're not doing that if you're coming to class, if you're meeting face to face, or not coming to class, and just turning in assignments. So teaching what engagement actually looks like and giving them the steps of how that looks. And if you have a class that you need to factor that in as participation points, you know, so be it. We do that in social work, and I didn't love it at first. I was like, we're just giving away free points. But once you define what it looks like to earn those points, it's not free points. It actually is teaching what engagement looks like. Did I
Yeah,
answer?
I think that's a really cool answer. Yeah. I think there's a role reversal in a brick and mortar class. There is that feeling in the back of your head that you know you're doing it wrong if you feel like a guru, right? That you know you're going down a bad ego path. I've found, if, like Glynita was saying, if you were answering emails, personal emails, and really engaging with the student, and putting that extra hour a day to sit and just nail yourself to the chair and hit those emails and respond to them, there's more of a coach, and it's more a, pardon the pun, collegial environment that you're starting to set up, and that it is work, but it doesn't feel like work after you do it for a while. I kind of dig it. I like that, like a student individually is sending an email with a question. It doesn't feel like that Friday at 4 p.m. office hours that you have on your syllabus, where you're not even at Friday at 4 p.m. and there's some knock on your door in your little dinky office, and it's a student. You're like, oh God, what a schlep. I really like it when a student emails me at 8 p.m. and is like, I'm tearing my hair out. I can't understand this. It's written by a Martian. And then I can maybe grab that one piece of confusion and smooth it out a little bit. I don't get to do that really in a room full of 28 people, all of whom need, you know? So that part of online engagement really excites me. I really love this question in the chat about encouraging other faculty to open their online courses to other faculty as guests. Do you do that? Do other folks do that?
No, I've never done that, but I would love the opportunity to watch someone else's course. But I think collaborating and using our faculty meeting times, I think settings like this are fantastic, but we all know that, as Donna said, as we got started, best laid plans, and everyone wants to attend and you've got something else pulling. We all attend our faculty, our individual faculty meetings. They're not optional. And carving out time really to focus on what are our departmental best practices. What does that look like? What are our definitions of engagement and participation and things of that nature, so all of us can move into this new era together. There'll always be people that I think take to it more and like it more. I think of my own department in social work, there are several folks that are still just like, yeah, no, I want no parts of this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's important that we all have access to the same skill set. And I think of it as just like, I mean, I've not been at the university as long as many of you, so I think of it as just coming in as new faculty and needing help to know how to do all the things that I was being asked to do in the classroom. I had a good inkling because I had taught at Ashford, but it was different. It was very different. And I think this is the same thing. We are ushering ourselves into a new age where hybrid education at minimum is going to be a new normal. Students are going to demand it. And if we aren't able to keep up with that demand, we'll get left behind, as they'll choose other universities that can offer what they need to flex their lives and schedules. So all of us being able to stay current with what is out there in regards to online education is going to be so important. And what I've accessed from, personal experience and research, and the social work program is starting a fully online program in August. That is great, but there's always more information out there. And if we dedicate the time in each of our departments, I think that it will serve us well as a university. And I did make a short PowerPoint, and I won't, because this conversation is going so well, I won't break the flow with a PowerPoint, but Donna or Lisa, I can send it to you and you can send it out.
Yeah, if you want to just send it to Donna, because she's got the list.
Sure.
Get to everyone. That's okay with you, Donna?
Yes, certainly. We'll send it out with the recording. That would be great.
I'd like to jump in, kind of following up to what Lisa had said. First of all, Terry, I think I fell in love with you when you said that you sometimes feel like an imposter, because I feel like an imposter every day. And I think that is what holds us back from opening our classes up to guests. It always amazes me the things that we expect out of our students as far as being open to feedback and being willing to grow, that very often faculty are not. It's like we have recognizing that we're always in a developmental approach. I do agree with Glynita for the fact that, I think the pandemic forced people into online. And pushing and pulling. But then I think they kind of began to like the flexibility of things. And I know with RN to BSN students, I don't have anybody that's in Louisville. I mean, they're all everywhere. So we are totally asynchronous. And I'm constantly trying to think of ways to make sure that what they're doing fits their life, and more importantly, makes them feel like they're growing. But it's, I've loved this conversation. Glynita, I would love to know how you express that engagement to the students, up front, and what kind of the expectations are. I agree with Donna, as much as we can share, and we're not all recreating the wheel. We can tweak it to what fits with us and our students, but I think we have such a collective wisdom that we don't necessarily always utilize or tap into.
I think in my field, you have to bring in other experts, because my field doesn't work unless it's a bunch of people doing something at once, right? And it's been a great experience for me to do these synchronous online classes, because I have to call someone in Los Angeles and say, hey, when everybody is doing this play, I need someone who can edit stuff together. So those artists from the different theaters I worked with out there are able to come in and sit in on rehearsals and watch the different students do the play that we were doing together. And all of a sudden, they're able to pop in their own tips and blocking and entrance notes, and it's a great way to take away both the imposter syndrome, but also to beef up the content of the class. Because all of a sudden you've got some expert from 3,000 miles away who doesn't have anything invested, right? So their feedback is totally objective, right? They're not really getting paid that much, and they could not be here. They're only here because they're Terry's friend. For the student, they're not feeling as much as they're being that they're being molded by a professor. They're feeling like, oh, it's a peer who does this in the real world telling me not to yell everything or whatever their feedback is. And it made me nervous to start doing it. But then once I did it, I was like, wow, boy, giving someone else a voice, that just makes you look like you know what you're talking about, you know?
Okay, so I have a very practical question that I think this has kind of been some of what has underlied some of our conversation too. But, you know, we talked about like laying out the expectations. So for an online class that's meeting synchronously, this is, maybe I'm just being selfish, but I have a very specific question. Like, when you're starting out this class and you're laying out the expectations, what do you do about the camera situation? Because I constantly go back and forth. Do you require cameras? Is that an invasion of privacy? And like, especially for theater, I would imagine you have to have your cameras on. So I'm just curious what you lay out for the expectations on those.
So we've talked about this as a unit in social work. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did not require cameras to be on. I mean, if you remember, everyone was just thrust into this situation and people were doing classes in their closet and car and what have you, just to be able to participate in class. And that was a situation that was very understandable, that you may not want your background shown. That was 2 years ago at this point. We have been in this pandemic for almost 2 full years. And now, learning from your home or wherever you choose to take your online portion of your class, that is a part of the learning process as far as we're concerned in the social work department. So cameras are required. Turning a camera off for us is the same as excusing yourself to go to the restroom or to take a phone call, or something similar to that you would do in the physical classroom setting. It's fine. They're adults. They're able to go take care of business as they need to. But engagement and showing that you are engaged in a course, if we were meeting face to face and you were standing outside the classroom door telling me that you were listening, I wouldn't really feel as though you were engaged in my course, right? So our rules have shifted and changed because this is not going away. I think there was a lot of grace that needed to be extended early on, that this is now a new normal. So even with having children at home, okay, fine. What that looked like 2 years ago and what that looks like now is very different. And if we have to have private conversations with students about, your kid is super cute, however, your kid's also very distracting. I need you to keep all that cuteness off the camera. And that is okay with us in social work, because we're trying to teach our students to be able to participate in this space professionally. And many, many social work jobs are online. I mentioned my entire practice is online. I can't do that with kids bouncing through here. This is a professional space that I am commanding at you know what I mean? So I think we just have to be straightforward and set the expectations. And we've all had some students that have spoken to us privately to say, these are my limitations, this is the problem that I'm facing. And then we figure that out on a case-by-case basis as necessary. But universally, cameras on, distractions away. You are functioning in a classroom setting just as you would be on campus.
Has anyone ever had someone's parents break into their class situation? Yeah, I think people give themselves the permission with the fine arts sometimes. I've had students who are like trying to do work and their dad comes in and starts like interrupting my class. And that is, yeah, that's the baby. I'm going to forgive it. I'm going to understand a cute baby. I bring him on. But sometimes the students' environments, as we all know, have things that are going on in this space over here that we just don't see, even after 2 years. It's really such a fine line between what you give grace to and what you say, no, bring it in, and what you say, hey, come on, we have to have at least some sort of guidelines. As far as a performance class goes, I'll be really honest, I don't give a fig if your dog is running through the background or you're outside or even if you're in your car. For this sort of work as a communicator, if that stuff's going on and you're still convincing me that you're Napoleon and you're ordering your troops to go into battle, you're a darn good actor. The principles always supersede how many kids are running around in the background. That said, yeah, there's standards, right? We got to walk in as if we're invested in a class, right? That goes for me too. My cat is not allowed in this room when I'm teaching.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to our earlier point of each department spending time carving out what is ideal for the learning environment that you're trying to create through your department, because it makes sense that theater arts and, you know, social work would have different things that were important for the class to be successful. And some of the conversations that we have in social work are, I shouldn't say some, I should say many of the conversations that we have in social work are very heavy, and they are important and absolute cornerstones to being able to do the work that we're trying to train our students to do. So when you have distractions from something that's already difficult to talk about, it just gives people an out, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I was looking at the, no, I need you here because this conversation is imperative to your growth as a student. And I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise. So that again brings me back to each department carving out, where do we sit on this? And you know, we are social workers, so we always are giving grace where needed, but we are also trying very hard to set a standard and a bar for what online education is going to look like. If you know you have a synchronous class that is meeting at 6 o'clock on Thursday, you need to be available at 6 o'clock on Thursday. Does that mean you need a babysitter, a cat sitter, not to be driving home from work? Yes, because if we were meeting in the classroom, you wouldn't be doing any of those things. So it is just creating the expectation that this will happen, but also having the grace to know that, like you said, even though we are 2 years into the pandemic, people are still having difficulties navigating different spaces. So yeah, each department really, I think really needs to dig into this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with your suggestion that we really should work it out departmentally. I think we could probably keep on talking about this for much longer, but we are pretty much at our time. I know some people have to get to class, so thank you, Glynita and Terry, both for sharing with us. It's been a really nice conversation. Appreciate your time. And Donna will be sending out the recording. And again, if you have something you wanted, the slides or whatever to share, she can send that out as well. So I think our next of these is scheduled for February 22nd. So stay tuned with that. And thank you all again.
This was
Thank
great.
you guys.
Thank you guys.
Terry, it was nice to meet you. I would love
Yes,
to
good to
get
see
engaged
you.
in some kind of theater, something. I miss
Come on
theater
in.
so much. I will email you. I'm not kidding.